After a planned trip to China was disrupted over what the U.S. calls a Chinese spy balloon incident, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken requested a meeting with China on the margins of the Munich Security Conference. China acquiesced, and Wang Yi, China's top diplomat, had an informal contact with the U.S. side on Saturday. According to the Chinese readout, Wang Yi laid out China's strong position on the so-called balloon incident and pointed out that what the U.S. side did was apparently an abuse in the use of power and a violation of customary international practice and the International Civil Aviation Covenant. China urged the U.S. to change course, acknowledge and repair the damage that its excessive use of force caused to China-U.S. relations. Why did the incident trigger such a diplomatic storm between the two countries, and will the air cool down, at least to a small extent? I'm still pleased to be joined from Munich, Germany by Wang Yi, president of CCG, a think tank, and from Beijing by Professor Huo Zhengxin at the China University of Political Science and Law, and also from Maryland, the U.S. by Saurabh Gupta, Senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist of the Institute for China-America Studies. So welcome to all of you. Gupta, let me get your take on what do you think is the purpose of the U.S. requesting the contact? Did they request to lodge strong protest against China? And why do you think China accepted it?
I think the U.S. wanted to express its position clearly at the highest level, at the Secretary of State level, and it was important to do so. But for me, what comes out of the meeting, particularly the strong undercurrent, is that the U.S. would like to put this issue behind and actually move forward in restarting and restoring the working groups that President Xi and President Biden had talked about at Bali. And so this was, yes, about laying down a marker that the US wanted to, but also moving forward. And I think the Chinese, from their end, too, saw it in that light, and therefore they expressed their strong position on the balloon incident, but use that more as a departure point for a new beginning, or at least in trying to restore the relationship back on something which can be more stabilizing. And we'll have to see, but I think that was the purpose of the meeting, frankly.
Professor Huo, according to the Chinese readout after the contact, China says if the U.S. side continues to fuss over, dramatize and escalate the unintended and isolated incident, it should not expect the Chinese side to flinch. What do you make of these words? It's not the usual diplomatic language. How do you see China trying to strike a balance between not playing along so that things get worse, but it also wants to make it clear that it won't be pushed around?
I think that the balloon incident itself is not a big matter. The problem is that the United States this time is overactive. And so the incident suggests that, on the one hand, that the distrust of China is popular among the American public, and the American politicians are hostile to China. They regard China as the major threat to the U.S. And what I worry is that the U.S. politicians may utilize this instance to deepen the distrust of China among the American public. And so these will undermine the U.S.-China relationship, both between the government and the Chinese and the people. And I think the Chinese government this time reiterated its position that China will have, they reserved the rights to take the corresponding measures, which is inconformable with the international law and international relationship. So Chinese position is clear that, on the one hand, the China want that both sides may treat the relationship in a responsible way.
Right. Well, on the other hand, we do see that China is being very firm, very clear about its message. For instance, Wang Yi was not shy about criticizing the U.S. in the open. He told the conference about the U.S. using 100% protectionism and unilateralism to benefit itself at the expense of others. He used the CHIPS Act as an example. Let's hear this episode.
中国2000年前就有一句古话 There is a saying in ancient China, a virtuous man may love money, but he earns it in an honorable way. A crook, however, uses any means possible. Today's U.S. has torn off all pretense. It even forgoes schemings and robs in the open.
So, Professor Wang, were you present on that occasion? I guess you were. What were your impression of hearing that? I mean, these are pretty strong words, basically China accusing the United States of robbing. And how did it go down with the audience? Is it a bit hard to digest for those?
Well, I think the atmosphere certainly is quite serious there. I think, Director Wang Yi's speech was highly expected, but but then what are the content that people really hear on the spot? So the audience, the auditorium is full. I was there, and I think that he made that speech is also because of recent. I think there's a host of measures taken by the U.S. government, including the Department of Commerce, on sanction China, on CHIPS Act. There's over 1,000 Chinese companies on the sanction list on the U.S. side. So this is really an equivalent, and also that's also I think among some audience. I mean, I heard a lot of openly said maybe U.S. should be more generous a little bit.
Because European companies are also suffering as part of the consequences of such acts. Professor Wang.
Absolutely, I think that's a big complaint from many companies I talked to, and also of course I've heard also other politicians and think tank people that really complain about that, saying that is no good, that is decoupling, that is not affecting China but the U.S. and Europe as well. So it's not good for the world. So this is really very, very interesting, highly watched on the scene actually. So it's very important that Director Wang Yi has made that important speech. But however, I think the meeting between Wang Yi and Blinken is very significant actually. So at this crucial moment, so to carry on and to leave things behind and to leave things behind. So that is, I think the meeting is quite timely, even though we have all clarified each positions, made a strong point. But I think the good thing is that we symbolize a new beginning, and we should really look forward.
Yeah. Well, I hope that's certainly the case, but the media, for instance, especially the media in the United States, if you watch what they talk, the kind of messages they're sending out, Mr. Gupta, is appalling because they literally pronounce China guilty before China is proving innocent. And right now, days after the incident, after they've been calling Chinese spy balloons, the CNN says the U.S. intelligence officials say they are still looking into the matter. They cannot characterize it as spy balloons. How do you look at the kind of practice of the media sentencing China in the first place and taking it as facts and spread it to the American people and people around the world?
Well, I would say I think it's a very unfortunate phenomenon. Media is doing what it's trying to do, get more clicks, get more people reading, but I mean there has to be a basic responsibility also to tell facts and tell stories accurately and correctly. But I think there's a larger point out here, and this point being that I think there's an understanding this is a balloon incident, and a balloon incident is just a balloon incident. But they are trying to magnify the effect of this balloon incident because there is a consensus among the political establishment within the Beltway that we need to compete with China and China as an adversary. But that is not a sentiment shared outside, beyond the Beltway. There are areas where folks feel like that, and there are areas where folks don't feel like that. And this was an occasion to use this incident, like, say, the U-2 incident in 1960 or Sputnik, and try to focus on China and show China is this really bad adversary, and to make that communication to the mass public and shape views. And I think that is the unfortunate part of the balloon incident. From a material perspective and from an intelligence or material perspective, it's minor. It'll blow over, it'll fizzle out. But from a larger political standpoint, we still have to see how it will impact U.S. views, the lay views about China in the United States, and it could have an impact out there, unfortunately.
Professor Huo, finally, do you see at least some intention on the part of the Biden administration to keep this relationship still on track?
Well, I think that the summit meeting between President Xi and President Biden last year in Bali suggests that the administration still hope to, keep the U.S.-China relationship in a manageable way, because these are the two big economies in the world, and they shoulder the responsibility to the international order. And I think without the cooperation between U.S. and China, many international challenges cannot be overcome. And I think that the Biden administration also realized this situation. So I do hope that the U.S. sides can be capable of treating the U.S.-China relationship in a responsible way.
Yeah, well, finally, Professor Wang, coming out of the Munich Security Conference, what is the biggest takeaway you have for us? 20 seconds if you can.
Sure. I think now the Munich Security Conference has become a consensus and also a gathering of the new initiatives, and also there's a lot of talking of how to minimize the gap between Europe and the U.S. But I think the real situation now is that the world is changing, and Ukraine war has changed a lot of things. But I think we probably need to work more. I mean, we should have more Chinese delegates to the Munich Security Conference. I think.
Okay.
But also there's a gap now between the two. So EU and US. So
right.
we will see what can be done in the future.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Wang Huiyao, and also to Surabh Gupta and Huo Zhenxing. With that, we come to the end of this special edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Li Xin in Beijing. On behalf of the whole team, thanks for watching. You've got the point.